Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This is a special live State of the Union as we react to the U.S. men's national team 2-0, 2-0 loss to Mexico tonight down in Guadalajara. We'll also touch on some other notable international results and some news, including Canada flying up there in the Great White North and Messi destroying Bolivia and Tommy heading over to England and Mosse's Brazil back on track. Speaking of Mosse, joining me as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you on this Tuesday, October 15th, as we come to you, like I said, minutes after the loss of the U.S. down there in Guadalajara to Mexico?
I'm doing well. This has a Summer of Stars feel.
Yes, we did this every single day, and we've done it now for multiple summers. It's fun. It's fun to do it live. I recognize that this was already a late game for much of the United States. So if you're staying up, thank you for staying up. This will be in your feed, too, so you'll be able to hear this. But, you know, sometimes the immediate reaction is important. I think I'm going to, as we react to this U.S. game, Mosse, I think I'm going to separate myself into two different kind of silos here. I'm going to start and be, I guess, much more emotional and therefore maybe irrational as I react to this game. And then I'm going to, you know, kind of be a little bit more reserved and calm and composed and looking at the big picture type of stuff. But this was not good. Any way you slice it. Okay, this was a bad, not just bad result, but a bad performance. Very, very little to look at and to say, hey, that was good, or hey, you can build on that. This U.S. team down in Guadalajara against what has to be said is a Mexico team that is not even close to the Mexico teams of the past, and yet it was men versus boys. This was a complete annihilation of the United States from start to finish. Brandon Vasquez came on and had one chance. Absolutely not. I'm hard pressed to find anybody, Mosse, that can hold their head high after this, including new coach Pochettino. And this is where I get a little bit, I guess, emotional and passionate when it comes to this. This is our greatest rival. Okay? If this is an important rivalry, if this is an important game, if we cannot afford to waste opportunities to play, given the fact that we are a year and a half away from the World Cup, we have very few windows, and yes, Pochettino is getting to know this team, but he is not going to have to qualify this team. So there are going to be very, very few opportunities that we have to be in a competitive environment, and an environment that is difficult and challenging, as this one was. This one hurts. I think it's embarrassing against Mexico to come out and play like that. It's embarrassing, yes, to lose, but in the way that we lost. And in the two games in this window, Panama at home and Mexico away in Guadalajara. This game, this was going to be the true test, with all due respect to Panama. This was going to be the true test. And yet we went down there with what has to be said is a B to C type of team. And again, that's disrespectful to the rivalry, and it's ultimately embarrassing in what happened.
Yeah, this was a throwback to a different era of this rivalry when the U.S. used to really struggle in Mexico. It happened tonight, as you said, with a virtual B team. I know some Mexican fans on social media today were bristling at that description, but I don't know how you could look at this U.S. lineup and not call it a B team. And yeah, listen, we can relitigate the whole load management issue. We talked about it with Stu the other day. Wherever you come down on that, the fact is that the lineup the U.S. put out tonight set the tone for this match. It just felt very flat by U.S.-Mexico standards because the U.S. didn't have enough quality to compete, and Mexico kind of looked across the field and saw that they were facing a very limited opponent, and so they just sort of did what they had to do to get the result. And yeah, I just don't think there's a whole lot of takeaways from this match given the lineup the U.S. put out.
All right, well, Pochettino, go try to manage the load that was, and the load of crap that was. And you sent players home. And in doing so, you made it very, very clear where your priority was. Now, before this game, I said that in a strange way, this is kind of smart from Pochettino and sly in what he did, because there is a built-in excuse. And we're already making some of these excuses here. And if he had won, it would have been, oh my goodness, he's incredible. He went down with his B team and was able to beat Mexico. But that he lost, okay, he was missing his players. When we go through the starting lineup here, Matt Turner in goal, Miles Robinson, who was a late change for McKenzie, who was going to start but evidently got hurt in warm-ups. Anthony Robinson again over there on that left-hand side, Joe Scally on the right-hand side, and Tim Ream once again in the center of the back four. Yunus Musa in the again, at least starting for the game over there again on that wing position. We'll talk more about that. Aiden Morris, Brendan Aronson, Gianluca Busio, and Malik Tillman comes in at the start of that three, and Brendan Aronson kind of went out wide. Josh Sargent up top. Look, Brendan Aronson works hard, but he's not good enough. Gianluca Busio, again, is just not good enough. Yunus Musa is not a winger. The back line was under pressure. Anthony Robinson, I guess if I have to pick somebody who actually had an okay day, it was him, because he just gets forward and is really good getting forward. Matt Turner isn't at fault necessarily for what he did, but you let 2 goals in, and you let it in a free kick from pretty far away, although it was very nice. It has to be said, Raul had a really, really good game, and he's the real deal. It'd be nice to have someone like Raul Jimenez up top.
Let's go there next. It's so great to see, because he suffered that terrible head injury a few years ago. You wondered if he was ever going to be the same, and he's now back to his best. Great start to the season for Fulham. Had a goal and an assist tonight. Was by far the best player in the field. The free kick you mentioned, and then he poked the ball away from Tim Ream after Tim Ream had taken it from him into the path of Huerta, who scored the second goal. And, we've talked recently about best strikers in CONCACAF. Is it Balogun? Is it Jonathan David? And I thought the Mexico submission in that debate was Santi Jimenez, but I think now it's got to be Raul Jimenez. And frankly, he might be. I would still put Jonathan David number 1, but Raul Jimenez is right there too. And that's a game changer for Mexico, because Santi Jimenez, for all his exploits at club level, hasn't really translated yet to the national team. So they're still searching for a guy up there, and now they have Jimenez back on track, so he could be a real difference maker for them.
And on the other side, I mentioned Josh Sargent, who gets another start, did nothing. And it's a little unfair to him, because, again, this was a game where the U.S. knew they were going to be under pressure. But there was no transition in terms of the space that was afforded to them when they won the ball. They got caught multiple times, almost living in the past, playing out of the back at times. Even the first goal, ultimately, the foul resulted in a time where they were trying to play out of the back, and then Miles Robinson, instead of clearing it long, although Scally kind of put him in the crapper there, it just nothing was functioning. And what's worse is that Pochettino in this cap stressed about, spirit and fighting and coming together. And there was none of that. This was it just seemed like another game for the players. And it only really changed a little bit when some of the substitutions came in.
Well, first off, the U.S. did start with a similar formation to the last game, where it was essentially a 3-4-3 with Scally, this time Miles Robinson and Ream at the back, Moose and Jedi as wingbacks, Morris and Busio sitting, and then instead of Pulisic, it was Tillman and Aronson floating behind Sargent. And one of the big storylines coming out of this window for me is it's got me wondering if this is Pochettino's preferred formation, or is it something he went to in this window only because it suited the players he had available, or is this what he wants to go with moving forward? And so when all the other players come back, we have to think in those terms and plug them into this formation. Now, at the start of the second half, when he brought on Zendejas for Musa and then Lund for Jedi, it felt like more of a 4-3-3 to me, with Busio and Morris sitting and Tillman as more of a 10, Aronson and Zendejas on the wings. So we saw different looks in this window, but it's interesting to me that he started both games in that building out of a back 3 look with 2 wing backs. So we'll see moving forward, when everybody's available, how he plays.
A little tip of the cap to Zendejas. I don't think that he's a national team player. However, in this moment, he was one of the few, if not the only player, that I think rose to the occasion and at least showed some you-know-what and came on and mixed it up a little bit. All right, it's not going well. It's not going to be a pretty game. They rarely are against Mexico. That's what some great rivalries are. They're all about, brutality and passion and the physicality and fight and all that kind of stuff. And at least he mixed it up a little bit, which was nice to see.
And speaking of rivalries, you notice he got booed because he plays for Club America. This game was in Guadalajara. But, yeah, I agree with you. The first dangerous moment the U.S. had all game was that lovely ball he floated to Christopher Loon on the back post where Loon didn't get good contact with it. Yeah, some of the backups looked okay, but you wonder how much of that was a function of Mexico taking their foot off the gas when it was 2-0. But, yeah, Vasquez was certainly more active than Sargent, had that one good chance, forced a save from Malagon. Zendejas, the play I just mentioned. Tanner Tessman, a bit more of a presence in the midfield than Bucio had. So, again, you wonder how much you read into that, but I thought some of the subs that came on looked better than the starters. I don't think anybody in the starting lineup, as you said, maybe Jedi really did anything. The U.S. didn't have a shot on goal in the first half. They couldn't string 3 passes together. Now, the field didn't help. And I have to say, every game I watch in Mexico now at one of these World Cup venues, I find myself worried about the pitch conditions. They got to get that sorted before 2026.
I mean, this is a World Cup field that we were looking at, and it did not look good. All right, my last comment in the chicken with his head cut off type of mode. Okay, here. Mosse, tell me something. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about Brazil here in a second. If Pochettino was the coach of Argentina, which we know is something that he wants to do, and Argentina was playing a game, albeit a friendly like this, against Brazil, would he have acted in the same way? Would he have sent players back? Would he have taken his foot off the gas? Would he have taken a B/C team to play against Brazil?
I don't think so.
Of course. Of course not. And so in that, there is, okay, maybe it's naivete, but it also can be looked at as disrespectful. Okay, so that's me flying off the handle. Now,
are we transitioning now to the more rational Alexi Lalas?
Exactly. We are transitioning. Very few of these players that we saw play tonight are going to step on the field in 2026. Very few players that we saw play tonight are even going to be on the team of 23 players come 2026. Also, what are we going to do? Fire Pochettino? He's not going anywhere. And as I've said time and time again, and it bears repeating, for Pochettino, all that matters is doing well in the World Cup. And we from the outside, we will nitpick and we will say, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you do this? I'm assuming he has a plan in order to maximize the limited time that he has so that he arrives in the summer of 2026 at the height of his powers and with the best possibility of being successful. And if he is ultimately successful, nobody's going to give a crap about what happened in Guadalajara on Tuesday, October 15th in the year 2024. It's not fun. I don't like it, but I understand that this is a not trust the process type of thing, but this is battle versus the war. This is a long, I know it's not a long time, but he is looking at it in terms of 2026. And that's smart and that's prudent. And it's understandable given the fact that he doesn't have to qualify. And ultimately, all that matters is 2026. And like I said, you, me, and others, we will assess this and say, well, what's going on here? And why did they do this? I mean, if you can count the number of players that legitimately are starters or at the very least are part of this team that aren't here, it's incredible when you look at Pulisic, when you look at Weah, when you look at Dest, when you look at Gio, when you know, the list goes on and on and on. Weston McKennie's not there. Tyler Adams is not there. And yeah, it's a little disappointing that there aren't others that are stepping up and taking this opportunity, especially in a game that was just dying for someone to, reignite the fire and the passion that should exist between these two teams. But this too shall pass. And as a matter of fact, this will fade off very, very quickly into the past, as long as he is successful in 2026. And that's ultimately the only thing that matters.
No, I agree. Frankly, when Huerta scored early in the second half, I thought this might be headed for like a 4-0. So the fact that the U.S. got out of there only with 2-0 and wasn't an embarrassing scoreline, it does snap their 7-match unbeaten run against Mexico. This is Mexico's first win over the U.S. since a friendly you covered at MetLife Stadium in September of 2019.
Ooh, wow. And just before we move on, if Matt Crocker and Oguchi Onyewu, leadership at U.S. Soccer, and obviously Pochettino, want us just to look at 2026 and not care about what happens between now and then, and by their actions, it seems that that is the case, because they obviously did not take this game seriously. That's okay, if that's what you want to do. But if the United States Soccer Federation wants to talk about this rivalry and the history surrounding it and the legends that have been involved, and they want to foster that and continue to make it into something bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes on, you can't afford to waste these opportunities. So make up your mind. Either you're going to take these games seriously, and again, diminishing games here. Very, very few opportunities for Pochettino before 2026. If you're not going to take them seriously, fine. Then you're putting all your chips into 2026, which I know I've said is important. But don't waste our time. Why are we watching this? Why are we caring about this? If you don't care about it, why should we care about it until 2026?
Is this still rational?
I know I veered back a little bit. I veered back a little bit, but, you know.
If it makes you feel better, Milan plays Udinese on Saturday, and Pulisic will be very rested for that game.
Load management can kiss my ass. Just drives. And it should hurt you as a player. You should want to have been on this field tonight to play Mexico. Whether it's in Guadalajara, whether it's in Los Angeles, whether it's in Columbus, or whether it's on the freaking moon, you should want to move heaven and earth to be involved in a game as a U.S. men's national team player against El Tri. Anywhere, anytime, bring it. You want to it. One leg, I don't care. You want to be involved. And if you don't want to be involved, and if you just brush it off, there is something wrong. There is something wrong with you, and there is something wrong with the program. All right. Mosse, where should we go to now?
Well, there was another CONCACAF friendly that I worked on today, live on FS1. Canada claimed a 2-1 win over Panama at BMO Field in Toronto. Kyle Lawrence scored in the first half, then Jose Fajardo equalized in the second half, but then Jonathan David scored the winner late. This was Jesse Marsh's first home match. He was excited about it. We played an interview he did pre-match. He was really looking forward to it. There was a nice crowd there. And so the good vibes continue for Canada under Jesse Marsh. I know Jesse has popped off, and I love it when he does that. He gives us plenty to talk about, but, he's backing it up. And it's not quietly, because we're certainly noticing it, but relative to other teams, he's just quietly moving along, getting ready for 2026 and doing a really, really good job with this team. Now, Canada's not necessarily going to surprise us, because we know who they are. This was the first game that they played, or that Jesse Marsh coached in Canada? Correct.
Good for him. Well, congratulations to him as they get ready also for 2026, but also they continue to play well and get the results. So well done to Jesse and Canada. We'll see our friends from Canada soon enough.
I think Panama have clearly established themselves as that fourth best team in CONCACAF. So we got a little in these two matches today. Was the top four in CONCACAF squaring off head-to-head, with Canada facing Panama and then Mexico taking on the U.S. It was a neat coaching matchup with Canada versus Panama. Jesse Marsh versus Thomas Christensen, who I think is a very good coach. Both former Leeds managers. So Panama played well. I continue to think they're a country that's headed in the right direction. I expect them to be there in 2026. You
and I have worked many, many World Cups, men's and women's, over multiple years here. When Panama qualified for the 2018 World Cup in Russia, take away the kicking of the ball. That was one of the great moments, at least for me, watching the players and watching the national anthem and seeing the pride of representing your country and representing your country in front of the world. That was wonderful. So Panama, because obviously the United States, Canada, and Mexico are not going to be involved in qualifying, they have to be licking their chops right now, saying, "Hey, that U.S. World Cup in 2026 is on off."
As far as the CONCACAF Nations League, the U.S., Mexico, Canada, and Panama were the 4 teams that got buys into the quarterfinals. We found out in this window who the other 4 teams will be in the quarters. Costa Rica, Suriname, Jamaica, and Honduras advanced from their respective groups. So that leaves you with 8. We're still waiting on the October CONCACAF rankings to come out. That will determine the matchups. Although Luke Weilman on the telecast today seemed pretty sure it's going to be U.S.-Jamaica in the quarterfinals next month. Those will be Pochettino's first competitive matches in charge. We know the home leg will be in St. Louis. If it is Jamaica, how would you feel about that?
Well, I really hope that the United States Soccer Federation and Pochettino want to win the game and recognize that their job is to have the United States men's national team win soccer games as opposed to the clubs for which these players play for. So look, Jamaica has always given us good games, but the United States is a better team. And certainly you're hoping that some of those injuries, however serious or not serious they end up being, get healed. Who knows? Maybe we have, some other players coming back, the Gios and the Tylers and that kind of stuff. So that would be good. But if it ends up being Jamaica, I'm not worried about it. Where should we go now, Mosse?
We go to other international action. We'll do the UEFA Nations League. We had some big games there. France claimed a 2-1 away win over Belgium in Brussels. Rando Colomwani scored both France goals, so they make it 2 wins out of 2 in this window. They had also beaten Israel a few days earlier without Kylian Mbappe, which I don't even want to go there because we still don't know the details of this. But if you Google his name, he went to Stockholm, Sweden over this window and might have gotten himself into some trouble there. I don't know. It's still a mystery exactly what went down there, so we don't have to go there. But at the very least, France showing an ability to win games without Kylian Mbappe.
What do you mean he got himself in trouble? I didn't.
You didn't see any of this?
No. What? You just don't want to talk about it because we're not quite sure what the story is, or what?
There's some sort of rape investigation.
Oh my goodness!
And it happened in the hotel where he was staying at, but it's unclear whether he's the one being investigated or whether it has nothing to do with him. You're seeing conflicting reports on that, so we'll just have to wait and see.
Oh boy! All right, but France gets the win away in Belgium.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
And then Germany claimed a 1-0 win over the Netherlands. Jamie Leveling, young Stuttgart player, scored the winner on his international debut.
Oh, must be so nice to be able to put young, inexperienced players on the field and trust them and have them live up to the hype.
Spain hammered Serbia 3-0. Morata among the scores there. And then some big news involving England. In this window, remember, they lost to Greece and then won away to Finland. And that was it for interim boss Lee Carsley because England, I don't know if this is official, but everybody, including Fabrizio Romano, reporting it. They are going to appoint Thomas Tuchel as their next coach, a contract through July 2026, so through the next World Cup. So England turned to a foreigner and a club manager as well. Tuchel, somebody we know well. Over the last decade, he's managed Dortmund, PSG, Chelsea, and Bayern, won trophies in all those places, including a Champions League title with Chelsea. So he's got the resume. It's a name that pops. Some people wondering, though, he's got a prickly personality. How's that going to go with the players and the English media? He's also a bit of a tactics wonk. How's that going to go in the international game? It's an interesting one. I spoke to Warren Barton today. He seemed relatively content with the hire. What do you make of it?
Somebody asked me today, because, when the U.S. job became available, it was, all right, well, what's the best coach manager out there available? And, the list came out, and obviously Pochettino was on that list, and Tuchel was out there too. And somebody asked, did we get the better if it had been between Tuchel and Pochettino? I think absolutely that Mauricio Pochettino was a much better pick in this moment for this U.S. team. If you're putting him up against Thomas Tuchel, I just think from a personality perspective, at this moment, I just don't think that it would have worked from a Tuchel for Tuchel coming in. But I also look at it from an England perspective. It just seems kind of weird, And there is there is a little bit, we talk so much about the American insecurity when it comes to, who we are on and off the field and our inferiority complex. And that certainly plays out in terms of the way that we look at our domestic talent or the way that we look at our domestic talent when it comes to coaches too. And, the Southgate did a really, really good job. I know ultimately he didn't bring them, what they wanted and didn't bring it home and all that kind of stuff, but he did a really, really good job. And so Tommy's got his hands full here, but he's got a great team, and maybe the federation over there in England believes that he's the one that has this much that is separating them from being really, really good to being great and obviously winning.
It's interesting because they didn't show a lot of urgency after the Euros to replace Southgate. And it makes me think, were they exploring the Pep option? There was this thought that maybe they were going to leave Carsley in there for a year as an interim, and then they were waiting out Pep's contract at Manchester City, which is over next summer, and to see if Pep wanted to take over a year before the World Cup. And maybe they got wind in the last few days that Pep was not going to do that. And so that's when they turned to Tuchel. Because otherwise, I don't know, it seems odd the period that they waited after the Euros and then now to hire a guy that you could have hired probably weeks ago. So, but that's how it goes. Thomas Tuchel in charge of England. For a country that's so provincial, they seem to be pretty open-minded when it comes to foreign managers for their national team, because this is the third one here in the last 20 years or so. Sven-Goran Eriksson, Fabio Capello, and now Thomas Tuchel.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll see how Tommy does over there as England manager, and see if it's coming home. If it's coming home, from Tommy. All right. Where to now?
We turn to South American World Cup qualifying. Lionel Messi had himself a night. Argentina hammered Bolivia 6-0 in Buenos Aires. Messi with 3 goals and 2 assists. Thiago Almada got one. So the world champs with an emphatic victory, and Messi putting on a show.
I mean, he's Messi. That's what he does. And especially when you're playing Bolivia and you're not playing Bolivia at altitude. Although Bolivia's been better, but my goodness, I mean, he tore him a new one. And Bolivia is not the only team to have this happen when Messi's on there, but the gulf in quality and talent between these two teams was certainly evidence. And if anybody thought that Messi relative to Argentina, and again, fingers crossed, we get to see him continue on into 2026 and defend his World Cup. If anybody thought that he was losing his scoring touch, he said, hold on. And again, after a pretty lengthy injury that he had coming back to MLS and now obviously coming back to Argentina. So congratulations to him and to Argentina.
Brazil claimed a 4-0 win over Peru in Brasilia. This is an inspired photo choice by Kyla Morris, by the way. She's got Andres Pereira up there. He scored an incredible acrobatic goal tonight. But the big story in this window for Brazil, they did pick up 2 wins out of 2, got the 6 points that I said they needed to get. So the much more comfortable situation on the table. I've told you about this eternal debate about European-based players versus domestic-based players. Yep. This was a window where the domestic-based players really showed out. In the 2-1 win over Chile, both goals, Igor Jesus and Luis Enrique, 2 Botafogo players, scored the goals. Luis Enrique came on tonight and got an assist and a goal. Gerson played really well in the midfield. And this is against the backdrop, I don't know if you saw this, but Brazil's president Lula came out publicly and said that they should only call domestic-based players. So this is a debate that's raging in Brazil, and certainly the domestic-based players that performed in these 2 games helped that case. So it's just something to keep an eye on moving forward.
I mean, for those that have watched and listened over the years, and certainly in recent years, this is as positive and excited and confident as I've seen you in a while. And obviously it was a good window. They got the 6 points, give themselves a little bit more breathing room going forward in terms of qualifying. The domestic players, like you said, showed up. So are happy days here again, or is this a little...
There's some footage surfacing of Neymar back in training with Al Hilal looking pretty good.
Ooh.
Vinicius might win the Ballon d'Or at the end of this month. So yeah, some of the dark clouds hanging over Brazilian football lifting a little bit. But in all seriousness, I want 6 points in the next window as well to really underline this improvement. The games there are away to Venezuela. Yes, Venezuela are better, but that's still a game that if Brazil play well, they should win.
Sure.
And then home to Uruguay, which is imploding. We can go there next. They had an awful window. They lost to Peru the other night, and then a 0-0 draw at home against Ecuador. And Marcelo Bielsa came out and admitted that the comments that the players made has really hurt the atmosphere in the dressing room, and he feels like he's lost control of the team a little bit. Yeah,
Bielsa, his feelings were hurt.
I'm a Bielsa fan, but I'm the first one to admit that guy can self-destruct, and we might be seeing it. A promising start with Uruguay, but now you're starting to see things unravel a little bit, and they've got a tough window in November. They face Colombia and then are away to Brazil, so that's something to keep an eye on as well.
I feel so bad for Bielsa and for Uruguay. All right, listen, before we go, Mosse, anything you want to put a bow on this window for the U.S. or anybody else?
Well, the Pochettino era is off and running, a win and a loss, but at least he's here. I think we all think this is a good hire, and he has a chance to do a good job in 2026. Let me just say, this upcoming weekend, it's Decision Day in MLS, and also the European leagues fire back up. So we'll be back on Monday with lots to talk about as we transition back to the club game.
Yeah, I think that you will forgive me my initial outburst. And, it's fun to have that reaction and that visceral type of reaction to a team that you know and love. And a team that represents what I feel is the greatest country in the world in this U.S. men's national team, in particular when you're playing against your biggest rival. But this too shall pass, and probably in the not too distant future, we will look back on it and we will have much more perspective when it comes to what happened. But it's never a good thing to lose. It's also never a good thing to lose to your biggest rival, and let's hope it doesn't happen again. But there are bigger fish to fry along the way. First window, so far, so good. I remain cautiously optimistic about what Pochettino can do for this team. But again, I just keep stressing, it is about the summer of 2026, and that is going to be huge. I don't think he's going anywhere relative to this result or any result that happens between now and 2026. But, stranger things have happened. I just don't think that they are going to happen here. I think he is here for that long haul and ultimately his legacy. And however we think of him is going to be relative to how well the team does in the summer of 2026. And if losing this game helps him decide more, as much as painful as it is from the outside, fine. He can do that and go on. But there's other windows coming, although not a lot of them before the 2026 World Cup. All right. Thank you for tuning into this live State of the Union, wherever you are and whatever platform you are. Thank you so much for watching the State of the Union. Again, if you are out there on the platforms and you want to send us some questions, comments, concerns, you can do that. Use the hashtag AskAlexi. Our State of the Union podcast handle is SOTU with Alexi, or you can use our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297, 657-549-2297. Keep downloading and reviewing and subscribing and rating and pounding those buttons over there on the old YouTube machine, and subscribe and pound right hand, left hand, double fist, and all that kind of stuff. Punch it on the Spotify and all the things that you do. We'll talk to you again next weekend. Next week. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And until then, and as always, my friends, size the day.